They mocked my job, called me worthless. Then the Pentagon chief called me sir. I stood in the glass-walled boardroom of Harris Defense Solutions, Washington, D.C.'s skyline gray beyond the windows. My parents, Thomas and Margaret Harris, sat at the head of the sleek table, their faces cold, confident. Olivia Harris, my sister, leaned forward, her suit sharp, her smirk sharper. Nathan Harris, my brother, tapped his pen, eyes flicking to me, then away. I'd flown in from Colorado, still in my wrinkled jacket, boots scuffed from a military base's dust. 3 weeks ago, I was calibrating AI drones in a bunker. Then Thomas's email hit. 10 words, no warmth, return to D.C., urgent company matter. Now I faced a table of polished folders, one labeled Daniel Harris. Richard Coleman, the company lawyer, coughed, his tie too tight. As per the restructuring, Olivia's nod cut him off. I felt their stares, heavy, waiting for me to crack. I didn't. If this story hooks you, hit like, share, subscribe. Comment 1 if you're cheering for me to turn the tables. 2 if you think my family's hiding darker secrets. Richard Coleman's voice faltered as he slid the folder across the table, its label glaring, Daniel Harris. The boardroom's air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. Olivia's smirk held, but her eyes darted to the folder, then to me. Nathan stopped tapping his pen, his fingers freezing mid-motion. My mother, Margaret, adjusted her bracelet, avoiding my gaze. Thomas, my father, sat rigid, his jaw tight, like he'd already decided the outcome. Richard cleared his throat again, his words clipped. The leadership roles, including majority control of Harris Defense Solutions, will transfer to Olivia Harris and Nathan Harris. Olivia leaned back, her posture screaming victory. Nathan let out a low chuckle, his eyes flicking to me, sharp and mean. Guess Grandpa wanted you debugging code in a basement forever, he said, voice dripping with mockery. Richard continued, his tone softer, almost apologetic. To Daniel Harris, the storage office in Building C, previously used by Edward Harris? Silence landed hard. Olivia's laugh was soft, cutting. That's generous, she said, her voice like silk over steel. I didn't flinch. I'll take it, I said, my tone flat, giving them nothing. Thomas's eyes narrowed, searching for weakness. I didn't give him one. I grabbed the folder and walked out, the glass doors hissing shut behind me. The D.C. rain hit my face as I crossed the parking lot to Building C, a squat, forgotten structure behind the main tower. The storage office door groaned as I pushed it open. Dust coated everything, shelves stuffed with old contracts, a desk with a chipped corner, a chair with one wobbly leg. It smelled of stale coffee and engine oil, like Grandpa Edward's workshop. I sat in the chair, its creak loud in the quiet, and opened the desk drawer. Beneath a pile of faded invoices, I found a small envelope, no label, just a note in Grandpa's tight scrawl, not for them. My pulse kicked up. I tore it carefully, revealing a USB drive, plain black, taped to a photo of me at 12, all elbows and braces, standing next to Grandpa at a company barbecue. His hand was on my shoulder, his grin wide, like he knew something the world didn't. This wasn't for Olivia or Nathan. This was for me. I didn't touch the USB right away. Not there. Not with Olivia's assistant hovering in the halls like a hawk. I drove to a rented apartment on the edge of D.C., a bare place with peeling paint and a single window facing a brick wall. My jacket hung on a hook by the door, my laptop bag slung over a chair, its hidden pockets still zipped tight, old habits from my days testing military firewalls. I plugged in the USB, its LED blinking blue, then steady green. 3 files loaded. Contracts_2024, PDF transaction_log, board_audio 23.mp3. My stomach twisted, This wasn't a memento, it was a blueprint. I opened the PDF first, pages of dense tables, project codes, and initials that looked like gibberish. But Grandpa had taught me his system when I was a kid, hiding puzzles and technical specs. Every contract has a story, he'd said, showing me how to spot discrepancies in numbers. I grabbed a notebook, started decoding. An hour later, my fingers ached, my eyes stung. The file mapped out defense contracts, tens of millions funneled through shell companies in Panama, Singapore, none linked to our family name, except one set of initials, OH, Olivia Harris. The apartment's radiator clanked, startling me. I closed the laptop, my hand brushing the multi-tool under the table, another habit from field ops. A knock came, sharp and quick. "Don't shoot," a voice called, smooth, edged with mockery. Olivia stepped inside, her coat spotless, holding a thermos like a peace offering. "Thought you might need coffee," she said, her smile too perfect. I didn't move. "I don't drink with family." She laughed, setting the thermos on the counter. "That office, Daniel. It's a closet. You sure you want it?" I leaned back, meeting her gaze. I don't cling to things I never had. Her smile flickered just for a second. "Just checking you're okay. You seemed off today." I tilted my head. "Have you ever seen me off, Olivia?" She didn't answer, just adjusted her scarf, her eyes lingering on my closed laptop before she left with a breezy, "Let's talk soon." I waited until her car's lights faded down the street, then zipped the files, encrypted them, and sent a message to Stephen Walsh. Subject: off-grid job, no traces. Stephen was ex-Pentagon, my partner from a drone project in Nevada. If anyone could scrub data without leaving a digital footprint, it was him. I clicked the MP3. Papers rustled, then Grandpa's voice, rough but steady. "This isn't what I signed. I won't change it now." A pause, then a click. Silence. I played it again. Same words, same cutoff. Someone had tampered with it. Stephen's reply pinged. "Panama accounts, Singapore transfers. This is bigger than corporate." I leaned back, the apartment's quiet pressing in. The boardroom wasn't just a family spat. It was a minefield. I drove to the company's secondary office at dawn, a low brick building tucked behind the main tower. Olivia's laptop sat on her desk, still logged into the company network. Her password, a lazy swipe pattern I'd caught her using at the meeting. The screen unlocked, revealing folders labeled like a bureaucrat's fantasy. Q1 projections, compliance reports, private. I clicked the last one. 2 files caught my eye. contract_draft_2024.pdf and funding_alec.xlsx. Both edited days before Grandpa's death, not by him. I copied them to my drive, then checked the voicemail app. One message from Richard Coleman: "Olivia, this feels wrong. If Nathan finds out, or Daniel, this is illegal. I'm out." I forwarded it to Stephen with a note. Motive, means, method. The rain outside hammered the windows, a warning. Olivia was careful, but not careful enough. I was just warming up. Stephen called an hour later, his voice low. "Those contracts, they're tied to a classified drone project. Funds rerouted through a Singapore shell. Olivia's consultancy is the hub." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Cross-check with Grandpa's USB." He paused. "This could bring down half the board." I didn't answer, just saved the files to a second drive and hid it in my bag's false bottom. The DC skyline loomed through the drizzle, sharp and cold. I drove to Arlington, to a diner where Karen Foster, Richard's old law partner, had agreed to meet. Stephen had tracked her down through a veterans charity database, tax filings, low profile. The diner smelled of grease and burnt toast, its booths cracked red vinyl. Karen walked in, her coat frayed, her eyes sharp despite the bags beneath them. "Daniel Harris?" she asked, voice clipped. I nodded, sliding my phone across the table. Richard's voicemail played. Olivia, this feels wrong. If Nathan finds out, or Daniel, this is illegal. Her face tightened, a flash of fear. Leave now, she said, low. I didn't budge. You've carried this too long. Time to talk. She sat, her hands twisting a napkin. I left the firm last year. My brother's sick, hospital bills. Olivia paid them, said it was a favor. I leaned forward. What did you do for her? She exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. I formatted contract drafts, added clauses she gave me, said Grandpa wanted to streamline the company. Richard warned her it was fraud, but she didn't listen. He quit over it. I set a blank USB on the table. Did you keep anything? She hesitated, then pulled an envelope from her bag. This is the original control agreement, signed by Edward Harris. Richard gave it to me before he left. Inside was a USB, no label, just like Grandpa's. Her hand shook as she slid it over. Why now? I asked. Her lips tightened. Olivia's payment stopped, said I'd done enough. I pocketed the drive. You're doing the right thing. She didn't look convinced. Back at the apartment, I plugged in Karen's USB. The agreement listed equal control for me, Olivia, and Nathan, Grandpa's intent, clear as daylight. The metadata checked out, created 3 weeks before he died, no edits since. I sent it to Stephen with a note, verify and cross-check with Olivia's files. His reply was instant. This is federal-level fraud. Pentagon's already sniffing around Harris Defense. I leaned back, the rain a steady drum outside. Olivia's consultancy was a front, siphoning millions offshore, and the boardroom was about to become a war zone. I drove to the company tower the next morning, the glass facade reflecting a bruised sky. A board meeting was set for noon, a routine budget review, but I wasn't there for numbers. Olivia stood at the head, her slides crisp, her voice smooth as she pitched new drone contracts. Nathan nodded along, his tie crooked, his grin smug. Thomas watched from the corner, his face unreadable. Margaret sat quietly, her hands folded, her eyes down. I waited for Olivia's pause, then stood. Grandpa's control agreement, I said, my voice slicing the room. The one you buried. It gave us equal shares. The air froze. Olivia's smile held, but her eyes turned hard. Daniel, this isn't the time for grudges. I held up a printed copy of the original agreement, its timestamp bold. Signed 3 weeks before he died. Your version? Edited after. Nathan's pen hit the table. Thomas's jaw clenched. Margaret looked up, her eyes flickering. Guilt, maybe fear. Olivia tilted her head, her voice smooth. Got proof? I didn't answer, just set the document down, letting the silence work. The board members shifted, their whispers low. Olivia's assistant fumbled her tablet, her hands unsteady. Nathan leaned close, his voice a hiss. You're out of your depth, Daniel. Stick to your algorithms. I met his gaze. I'm safer with code than with family. The meeting dissolved into murmurs, Olivia barking at her assistant to reschedule. I left before she could corner me, driving to Lisa Bennett's office. Lisa, my lawyer, sat behind a desk with a single cactus in a clay pot. This agreement's ironclad, she said, scanning the file. The metadata ties it to Grandpa's system, not Olivia's. And the offshore logs, they scream money laundering. I nodded, arms crossed. What's next? She tapped her keyboard. We file a federal petition to contest the control transfer. Fraud gets us jurisdiction. My phone buzzed. Stephen again. Pentagon flagged Olivia's consultancy since last year. Singapore accounts, Panama transfers, all linked to her. Nathan's name's on a Shell LLC, too. Lisa looked up, her eyes sharp. That's your leverage. This agreement's your spark. We drafted the petition that afternoon, 15 pages of declarations, digital logs, and Karen's sworn statement. Lisa signed the cover letter with a quick flick, then slid a copy across. No header, addressed to Olivia's office. You want her to know it's coming? She asked. I nodded, but not from where. We drove to the federal clerk's office, the marble lobby cold and quiet. I handed the packet to the clerk. Fraud petition, I said. He stamped it, his voice flat. 72 hours, maybe more. Lisa glanced at me as we stepped outside. If this holds, we're freezing every account they've touched. I didn't answer. This wasn't about the company anymore. It was about tearing down the lies they'd built on Grandpa's name. Back at the apartment, I stared at the USB from Karen Foster, its plain surface catching the dim glow of my desk lamp. The DC skyline looms through the window, a jagged line of steel and glass under a bruised sky. Stephen Walsh's message blinked on my screen. Scrub complete. Offshore accounts traced to Olivia's consultancy. Dig deeper? I typed back. Find Karen Foster's old firm records. She's the key. Karen, Richard Coleman's former partner, had gone dark last spring. Her name barely a whisper in legal circles. If anyone knew what Richard was hiding, it was her. The files from Olivia's laptop, contract_draft 2024, and funding allo, screamed forgery. Edited days before Grandpa Edward's death. Richard's voicemail hinted he'd been strong-armed into silence. I wasn't buying coincidence. The drive to Arlington took 40 minutes, the highway slick with drizzle, my truck's wipers slapping a steady rhythm. Karen's address came from a veterans charity list Stephen had dug up, tax prep for retirees, low-key. Her apartment sat above a corner store, its staircase creaking under my boots. I knocked, my jacket damp from the mist. The woman who answered looked worn, gray hair in a tight bun, eyes sharp but tired. Karen Foster? I asked, already sure. She tensed, her hand gripping the doorframe. I don't take walk-ins. Call the charity. I held up my phone, Richard's voicemail crackling. Olivia, this feels wrong. If Nathan finds out, or Daniel, this is illegal. Her face shifted, annoyance, then a flicker of fear. You need to go, she said, her voice low, shaky. I didn't move. You've carried this alone too long. Time to talk. Silence hung heavy. Her jaw tightened. Then she stepped back, letting me in. The apartment was cramped, cluttered with stacks of legal pads, a coffee mug with a faded Army logo. A radio hummed faintly, some talk show droning about taxes. My brother's in hospice, Karen said, unprompted, her hands twisting a dish towel. That's why I left the firm. I didn't press. Her guilt was loud enough. She sat across from me, her eyes avoiding mine. I shouldn't have helped Olivia. She said it was routine, just contract cleanup, nothing binding. Streamlining the company, she called it. I leaned forward. What did you do? She exhaled, her voice barely audible. I drafted clauses, rerouted funding lines she gave me, said Grandpa wanted tighter control for her and Nathan. Richard warned her it was fraud, but you don't say no to Olivia. He tried. They froze him out. I set a blank flash drive on the table. Did you delete your emails? She didn't answer, just opened a drawer and slid an envelope across. This is the original control agreement, signed, time-stamped. Richard gave it to me the day after Edward passed. Inside was another USB, unmarked like Grandpa's. Her hands trembled as she pushed it toward me. Why now? I asked. Her lips pressed tight. Olivia covered my brother's bills for months, said it was kindness. It was hush money. I pocketed the drive. You're doing the right thing now. Her eyes said she didn't believe it. I drove back to the apartment, the rain heavier now, blurring the city lights. I plugged in Karen's USB. The control agreement listed equal shares for me, Olivia, and Nathan, Grandpa's intent, clear and unyielding. The metadata matched, created 4 weeks before he died, no edits since. I sent it to Stephen with a note, verify and cross-check with Olivia's files. His reply came fast. This is defense contract fraud. DOJ's already eyeing Harris Defense. I leaned back, the rain's steady patter filling the silence. Olivia's consultancy was a shell, funneling millions offshore, and the boardroom was about to become a battlefield. I drove to the company tower the next day, the glass facade dull under a gray sky. The board meeting was at 11, a standard compliance review, but I wasn't there for pleasantries. Olivia stood at the front, her presentation polished, her voice steady as she talked up new Pentagon contracts. Nathan sat to her right, scribbling notes, his grin smug. Thomas watched from the corner, his face blank. Margaret sat 2 chairs down, her hands folded, her eyes on the table. I waited for Olivia's slide to change, then stood. "Grandpa's control agreement," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "The one you buried. It gave us equal shares." The air stilled. Olivia's smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned to stone. "Daniel, this isn't the place for personal issues." I held up a printed copy of the original agreement, its timestamp stark, signed 4 weeks before he died. Your version? Edited after. Nathan's notebook hit the table with a thud. Thomas's jaw tightened. Margaret glanced up, her eyes flickering with something. Regret? Maybe fear? Olivia tilted her head, her voice smooth as glass. "Do you have proof?" I didn't answer, just placed the document on the table, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. The board members shifted, their murmurs low. Olivia's assistant scrambled to gather her papers, her hands shaking. Nathan leaned toward me, his voice a hiss. "You're out of your league, Daniel. Stick to your drones." I met his gaze. I'm safer with tech than with family. The meeting ended in chaos. Board members whispering, Olivia snapping at her assistant to schedule a follow-up. I left before she could corner me, driving straight to Lisa Bennett's office. Lisa sat behind a desk with a single cactus, its spines sharp in the morning light. "This agreement's bulletproof," she said, scrolling through the file. "The metadata ties it to Grandpa's system, not Olivia's. And the offshore logs? They're money laundering, plain and simple." I nodded, arms crossed. "What's next?" She tapped her keyboard. "We file a federal petition to contest the control transfer. Fraud gets us DOJ jurisdiction." My phone buzzed, Stephen again. DOJ flagged Olivia's consultancy since last year. Singapore accounts, Panama transfers, all linked to her. Nathan's signature's on a shell LLC too. Lisa looked up, her eyes narrowing. "That's your ammunition. This agreement's your trigger." We drafted the petition that afternoon, 17 pages of declarations, server logs, and Karen's sworn statement. Lisa signed the cover letter with a quick flourish, then slid a copy across, no header, addressed to Olivia's office. "You want her to know it's coming?" she asked. I nodded, but not from where. We drove to the federal clerk's office, the marble lobby echoing with quiet authority. I handed the packet to the clerk. "Fraud petition," I said. He stamped it, his voice flat. 72 hours, maybe longer. Lisa glanced at me as we stepped outside. "If this holds, we're freezing every account they've touched." I didn't answer. This wasn't about the company anymore. It was about dismantling the lies they'd built on Grandpa's name. Back at the apartment, I uploaded the anonymous packet to Olivia's firm through a triple encrypted network. Subject, "For your review." No signature, just the weight of what was coming. My phone buzzed minutes later. A text from Olivia, sharp and cold. "What did you just do?" I didn't reply. She just realized the game had shifted, and for once, she wasn't in control. The next morning, Stephen called. Olivia's purging cloud backups, local drives wiped at dawn. "But I mirrored their server last night. We've got everything, emails, contracts, even her voice memos. One file stood out, a recording of Olivia rehearsing a board speech dated 5 days after Grandpa's death. Grandfather's vision was clear, she said, her voice polished. We honor his legacy. The lie was so smooth it almost sounded true. At noon, a courier dropped an envelope at Lisa's office. No name, just a note in neat ink. Not smart to dig into family. Lisa called, her voice tight. This a threat? I leaned against the apartment's window, the city skyline faint through the rain. Let them think it scares me. We filed a temporary injunction that afternoon, Lisa's wording sharp. Pending federal review, control transfers pose a risk of obstruction. It hit the docket before Olivia's team could react. Steven sent another update. DOJ had flagged 3 accounts: Olivia's consultancy, Nathan's investment pool, and LLC in Thomas's name, all marked for audit. They're crumbling, Steven said. Their security's a house of cards. I parked outside Olivia's office that evening, the glass building glowing under streetlights. At 7:30, she stepped out, her coat buttoned tight, her posture stiff. A man walked beside her, dark suit, federal badge clipped to his belt. She paused at her car, spoke to him too long, then scanned the street like she felt my eyes. She knew the net was closing, but she didn't know I'd already mapped her every move. You don't survive defense engineering by guessing. You survive by being 10 steps ahead, so when they start wiping drives, you're already holding the backups. I drove back to the apartment, the rain a steady drum. Steven's next message was a bombshell. Found a deleted email from Olivia to Richard, dated the day Grandpa died. She instructed him to backdate the contract draft. He refused. I opened the file, my pulse steady. The email was short, brutal. Do it or your career's over. Richard's reply was a single line. I'm out. I forwarded it to Lisa with a note. This seals it. The next day, I met Steven at a coffee shop near the Pentagon, its windows fogged from the morning chill. He slid a tablet across, showing a heat map of Olivia's transactions, red dots clustering in Singapore, Panama, a faint trail to Dubai. These aren't just contracts, he said, his voice low. They're tied to a drone project never approved by the Pentagon. Millions unaccounted for. I nodded, saving the heat map to my drive. What about Nathan? Steven's lips twitched. His LLC's a front. Signed a transfer for $2 million last week. Sloppy. I leaned back, the coffee shop's hum fading. Send it to DOJ, anonymously. He nodded, already typing. Done. Back at the apartment, I opened Karen's USB again, cross-checking the control agreement with Olivia's forged files. Every discrepancy was a nail in her coffin, timestamps off by days, IP addresses tied to her laptop, not Grandpa's. I sent the findings to Lisa, who replied, "This is enough for a criminal probe. DOJ's moving fast." My phone buzzed again. Margaret, my mother, texting. "Can we talk, please?" I stared at the screen, her name foreign yet heavy. I didn't reply. Not yet. The city outside was gray, the rain relentless. Olivia's empire was cracking, but I wasn't done. Grandpa's voice from the MP3 echoed in my head. This isn't what I signed. He trusted me to finish what he started. I wasn't about to let him down. The federal courthouse in D.C. stood like a stone fortress, its steps slick with morning mist. Inside, the hearing room buzzed with quiet tension, reporters jotting notes, board members whispering, their polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. I sat next to Lisa Bennett, her laptop open to a folder of time-stamped files, each one a weapon ready to fire. Across the aisle, Olivia Harris sat stiff, her navy suit sharp, flanked by two attorneys whose sleek briefcases screamed money. Nathan Harris slouched beside her, his tie askew, his eyes darting like he sensed the walls closing in. Thomas Harris, my father, sat one row back, his hands clasped, his face unreadable. Margaret Harris, my mother, sat beside him, her beige dress soft, her gaze fixed on the floor. Her fingers brushed Thomas's sleeve, a small gesture that hit harder than I expected. I kept my face blank, my hands steady. Judge Patricia Collins entered, her robe settling like a quiet command. Docket 25 CV 112, Daniel Harris versus Olivia Harris et al. On the matter of corporate fraud and controlled distribution, proceedings are in session. Lisa stood, her voice clear, deliberate. Your Honor, we present evidence that the current control agreement of Harris Defense Solutions was forged, overriding Edward Harris's original intent for equal shares. She laid out the timeline: Karen Foster's deposition, Richard Coleman's voicemail, the metadata from the original agreement. Exhibits piled up, each one a stone in the foundation we'd built. Olivia's lead attorney, a man with a voice like polished oak, objected at every turn. Terms like unsubstantiated claims and questionable sourcing thrown like punches. Lisa countered with server logs, IP traces, two-factor authentication records. Everything was locked tight. Then came Karen's video testimony. Her face filled the courtroom screen, tired but firm. I worked with Richard Coleman for 12 years, she said, her voice steady. He told me to keep the original control agreement. Edward Harris wanted equal shares for Daniel, Olivia, and Nathan. Olivia's revisions changed that. A ripple ran through the gallery. Olivia's jaw clenched, her lips a thin line. Her attorney stood, his tone sharp. We moved to strike. No independent verification this file wasn't altered. Lisa didn't flinch. Your Honor, this deposition was extracted with DOJ oversight. Here are the certified server logs. She handed up a binder, its weight landing like a hammer. Judge Collins scanned it, her face unreadable. The court finds sufficient cause to suspect fraud. Asset transfers are suspended pending review. The original agreement will serve as the provisional basis. Olivia stayed still, her eyes hard. Nathan's face drained of color, his fingers gripping the table. Thomas's shoulders sagged, just slightly. Margaret looked at me, her eyes flickering, then away. Lisa leaned close, her voice low. We just broke the foundation. I nodded. Not done yet. The courtroom cleared for lunch, but I stayed, watching Olivia's attorneys huddle, their whispers frantic. Outside, the air was sharp, the Potomac River a dull shimmer in the distance. My phone buzzed. Stephen Walsh. DOJ's moving. Olivia's consultancy accounts are frozen. Nathan's LLC is flagged too. I exhaled, the cold stinging my lungs. This wasn't just about shares anymore. It was about tearing down the empire they'd built on Grandpa's name. I was back in the apartment by dusk, the rain a steady drum on the roof. Lisa called from the courthouse steps. DOJ's coordinating with DC's financial crimes unit. This is real now. I stared at the USB on the table, its black surface catching the lamplight. It was always real. She paused. They're scared, Daniel. They should be. At 3:12, another file came from Karen, a full video deposition, her voice calm as she detailed Olivia's pressure, Richard's warnings, the original agreement hidden for years. I kept it because someone might need it, she said, her eyes steady. I'm glad it was Daniel. Attached were emails, PDFs, metadata, tying Olivia's consultancy to offshore accounts. I forwarded it to the DOJ. A confirmation pinged back, all asset disbursements frozen under Section 721C, review pending. Olivia called just after sunset. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Her voice cracked, no longer polished. You think this is over? You just burned your family. I stayed silent. You have no idea what you've done. I leaned back. No, Olivia, you have no idea what I'm still holding. I hung up, the silence heavy, final. The next morning, the headlines hit, subtle but sharp. Ex-defense engineer alleges family fraud in Harris defense. Olivia hadn't waited for dawn to spin her story. The article used an old photo of me from a tech conference, hair short, eyes locked on a tablet. The implication was clear. Obsessive, unstable, a troublemaker. Olivia's quote was a masterclass in venom dressed as pity. Daniel's always struggled to fit in. This is painful, but we must respect Grandpa's wishes. Nathan chimed in, his voice thick with fake concern. His time in tech skewed his perspective. It's not his fault, but it's not a legal case either. I closed the browser, the apartment's quiet wrapping around me. Lisa stormed in 20 minutes later, her face tight. "This is character assassination, Daniel. We need a statement." I shook my head. "Let them talk. Truth lands harder than noise." She sat, arms crossed. "They're painting you as a liability." I met her eyes. "Let them." My laptop dinged, Stephen's folder, labeled Coleman_voicemails. I opened the files. Richard's voice, cautious, weary. "Olivia, this isn't what we agreed. You said minor edits. This is fraud." Another clip. "If this leaks, I'm done. You promised it stays between us." The last file was buried in a deleted partition, recovered from a backup server. Richard, frantic, whispering, "If anything happens, tell Karen the original's in drawer C." The air felt heavier. Richard had known the truth, and he'd left me the key. The courtroom was quieter the second day, the gallery packed but hushed. Lisa warned me it would be procedural, more evidence, no fireworks yet. But Olivia had other plans. Her attorney stood, holding an ivory envelope with a gold seal, pure theater. "We didn't want to introduce this early," he said, sliding a document across. "But since Mr. Harris insists on evidence..." Lisa opened it, her eyes scanning the page, a codicil to Edward Harris's control agreement, dated 2 days before his death. My name, Daniel Harris, was scratched out, the language cold, precise. Signed, Edward Harris. Notarized, Richard Coleman. Olivia's lips curled, a smirk she couldn't hide. "He changed his mind," she said. "Regretted giving you anything." I didn't blink. He couldn't sign that day. He was in a coma. We left for the hospital archives at dusk, the DC Medical Center's parking lot dusted with frost. Lisa handled the paperwork while I paced, my breath clouding in the cold. An hour later, we had it. Edward Harris's final medical logs. Full sedation, morphine drip, no record of lucidity on the codicil's date. Stephen called, his voice tight. Coleman's phone GPS shows he was in Baltimore that week, not DC. Back in the truck, Lisa scrolled through ICU photos I didn't want to see again. Grandpa, pale, tubes across his chest. One image stopped us cold. Olivia in the background, staring at the nurse's clipboard, time-stamped 2 hours after the alleged signing. Lisa whispered, "This buries her." The next morning, Judge Collins called an emergency session. The courtroom was still, no murmurs, just tension. Olivia's attorney presented the codicil like it was gospel. Lisa stood, 2 files in hand. "Your Honor, we challenge this codicil's validity on grounds of medical incapacitation and notary fraud." She handed up the sedation chart, GPS logs, and ICU photo. Olivia's face drained, pale, then red, then white. The judge's voice was flat. "This matter is escalated for forensic document examination. Signatures and notary are under court order." Her gavel struck. "If this is forged, we're looking at criminal fraud." The forensic report came in a plain envelope. No fanfare, but its weight was seismic. Lisa opened it, her eyes scanning the text. Signature discrepancies confirmed. Stroke patterns inconsistent. Not signed by Edward Harris. Coleman's notary fabricated. The codicil was dead. At the courthouse records office, I watched Olivia's attorney shrink as the clerk stamped fraudulent across the document. Stephen forwarded a DOJ memo, asset seizure authorized, Olivia's consultancy, and Nathan's LLC under full audit. Nathan tried to dodge, funneling $500,000 into a crypto wallet in Malta. Stephen traced it through a VPN he thought was secure. It wasn't. Your brother is going to regret that crypto move, Stephen texted, almost gleeful. Olivia's office went silent by noon, phones dead, her assistant posting a vague LinkedIn resignation. The D.C. Bar Association issued a provisional suspension for Olivia's license. Thomas released a statement to the press. I'm stepping down to focus on family. Translation, he was running. I passed him in the courthouse hallway, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. We locked gazes for half a second. He looked through me. That night, Lisa slid a glass of whiskey across the apartment's counter. She didn't drink. I did. Olivia could FaceTime, she said. Wire fraud, contract manipulation. I held the glass, didn't sip. I hope she does. It wasn't joy, just gravity settling things right. My phone buzzed past midnight, a text from Margaret. Please come home. I need to tell you something. Her name glowed on the screen. Heavy, real. I stood, packed, and drove to the house by the Potomac, the one I'd once called home. The river was calm, silver under the dusk. I parked by the old mailbox, rusted but standing. Margaret waited on the porch, 2 rocking chairs, a pitcher of lemonade between them, condensation beating on the glass. I took the left chair, Grandpa's old spot. We didn't speak at first. She looked fragile, her gray hair loose, her hands trembling as she reached for the glass and didn't drink. I saw the hearings, she said. On TV, I asked. She nodded. Half the city did. Her smile flickered, didn't hold. I should have spoken up. Richard told me about the original agreement, equal shares, but Olivia said it'd keep the peace, that you didn't want the company. I turned slightly. Did I? She flinched. I thought peace mattered more than truth. I let the words sit. Was I ever yours? I asked, quiet. Her lips parted, no sound. She reached out, her hand resting on my shoulder, light, uncertain. It didn't fix anything, but it was something. She looked at the river. Your grandfather knew what he was doing. That office, he left it for you. The drawer only opens with your fingerprint. He rigged it years ago. I glanced at the truck, parked under bare branches, remembering the drawer's odd click. I thought it was just old. I'm not staying, I said. She nodded, no argument, but I'll visit. Her smile was faint, real. We sat as the sky turned purple. 2 people on a porch, one starting to forgive, the other beginning to see. The final paperwork came stamped, sealed, no ceremony. The estate officer read the updated shares. 1/3 to Olivia, 1/3 to Nathan, 1/3 to me. Not justice, but close enough. Olivia didn't show. Her indictment was pending, her license on the line. Nathan hadn't met my eyes since the audit. Thomas vanished from public view. The family, fractured at its core, had no statement. I drove to the Potomac, the trees blazing red and gold. Grandpa used to say autumn showed things as they were, no more hiding. I parked by the trail where he'd taught me to code, back when life was just algorithms and trust. Sitting on the tailgate, I signed my share to a tech fund for veterans, a program for kids learning to code, something bigger than revenge. My phone rang as I climbed into the driver's seat. Lisa, you sure? It's a big number. I slid the old photo of Grandpa and me into the glove box, our grins wide, his hand on my shoulder. It's not about the money, I said. It's about showing who they are. She exhaled. You walked away with your soul intact. I didn't answer. The truck's engine growled, then steadied. The glove box light blinked, solid now. I shifted into gear, the trail ahead lined with golden leaves. The wind lifted my bag in the back seat, then let it settle. I didn't look back. I didn't inherit power. I inherited truth, and that's worth every mile.